Cool. Sounds good. Well, the content for this call is going to be talking a little bit more about Congregate, and actually not even Congregate specifically, but about kind of the specific tools that professional services kind of builds in order to support customer migrations. And the context for this was this merge request that's linked there in the second comment, which was attempting to add some language to I think the README. And Michael, like you had a comment which is kind of posted there in the document, which is stating that Congregate is not designed for one-off solutions, which makes a ton of sense. So the thing that I'd like to kind of like move towards is defining and writing down what we see Congregate and similar tools doing versus what we feel like should be handled natively in the GitLab application, and create like a clear kind of like dividing line between the two. So anyone who's interested can understand like why those two, we have specific tools that are being built by PS, and also understand and kind of prioritize and focus like the import team and kind of what they're working on and what they need to do versus what ProServe is going to do. Does that all kind of make sense?
Yeah, that works.
Cool. Awesome. So the goal of this, as defined in kind of like 3A, is really would like to add some language to the direction, the importer direction page, to make that dividing line particularly clear. So I guess I'll kick off the discussion and say, to ask that question to the group. What do we see as the difference between the two? What do we and I guess one thing that I thought was interesting is like on a one-on-one, I asked Harris about this question, and he saw a world in which Congregate would continue to live forever, like when and GitLab Inc. would continue to use Congregate indefinitely, essentially. So I was a little, I wanted to get everyone's take on that. Like, what do we see Congregate and the tools that PS is doing, is building? Do we always see that being the case? There will always be a need for like ad hoc solutions and scripts, or do we see that eventually like entirely moving into the application? I'd love to have everyone's kind of take on that.
Yeah, so I think one of the ideas we've toyed around with in PS with Brian coming on, I think, was how do we, and I'm putting words in Brian's mouth, I'm also saying something that I've thought about before I came in too, is Congregate is a PS engagement tool. It's not open source, which is unfortunate, but it's just how we're going with it. But one idea that I think we've toyed around with is how do you make the features that we use on Congregate open core, and then kind of help to scale that up. So an example of this would be like when we needed to do an at scale Bitbucket migration, and the UI would not be cutting it due to the scale. That's where we came in to get that API built. We got the API built, and then we funneled that right back into Congregate to then scale up that effort. So that's one way I look at it. As I think the core functionality of what Congregate does should obviously just reside in the product, and then we use it to orchestrate at scale to make sure that we can handle a large scale migration a bit easier. Even if we built it into the UI and built all the importers to scale in the UI, I think there's going to be some gaps that are going to be either a challenge to maintain, or just handling it for certain use cases just won't work as well. So that's one thought, is kind of that open core idea of there's the base importers and we kind of build some stuff on top of it. At the same time, I think the other nice part about having a tool like Congregate around is it helps us to discover gaps that we can funnel right back into the product. Examples of this being the lack of LFS support in the Bitbucket server importer, right? Like that we discovered that during an engagement. We troubleshot that with Cassio, and he has created an MR, and that's in maintainer review at this point, which is great. Or the Bitbucket server import API, specifying the GitHub host name, that's another MR that's in review. Things like that, I think, is going to be the biggest benefit for us, is we get to kind of discover some of those issues, unfortunately, but we can either correct them or we fix them in the product directly. That's kind of where I see it going. I see it being basically a life cycle of the importer functionality, which would be, we start with, let's integrate what we have, find out where the gaps are. Can we fix it with another API request in Congregate to get us over the hump? If yes, let's do that. After that, create a feature request to say, hey, this is missing, we need this in here. And if we can't fix it easily in the API, we have to fix it in the product, which funnels back into that feature request. and we reintegrate it accordingly. That's my quick, just, just spitting out a bunch of words idea of how I see this going.
Yeah, I'd like to echo the part about, well, most of it honestly, but just to double click on the core functionality being in GitHub, we don't want to own any of that like actual migration logic. Like, for example, the GitHub importer is a great case where we see an awesome amount of performance by using that, rather than having to do all these different disparate API calls to facilitate a large scale migration. Those, when we're in that situation, it takes a really long time to do a scaled migration. So ostensibly, the right place for the import logic is in the product itself. I do think scaling the solution for customers is the primary objective of Congregate. But additionally to that, if we bake too much of it into the product and it can't be customized easily to meet the customer's needs, or made flexible enough so the customer can use it, that's a concern that I have if the pendulum shifts too far into product. So the comment about Congregate living on in perpetuity, I don't think is that unreasonable. I do think a lot of the functionality should make its way into the product as we see the patterns of what is mostly used. But there's a level of flexibility that we have with Congregate to be able to make these on-the-fly changes to support a customer need that would require like an escalation up to VPs if it was baked into the product and we needed a turnaround on a new feature in that product. So those are the two big reasons why I'm advocating. I second Michael's opinion on how we should maintain Congregate as a thing for at least the near to medium term. Maybe in the future, we can figure out a solution that covers the two requirements of that I just mentioned in a way that we don't need Congregate. That's perfectly fine. As long as we're able to continue to meet customers' needs, that's the goal that I have.
Thanks both of you. I feel like we are on the same page as far as sort of the high level or overall direction for each one of the groups. I think where I was struggling a little bit was sort of defining whether it's possible for us to fully, deprecate Congregate. So without knowing exactly the type of, solutions that you put into it in order to do scaling, I don't know if that's something that we can do. So if you could maybe, Brian, if you could maybe talk more a little bit about what scaling means to you. When you say like, we need this for scaling, what that might be. I fully agree that all of the import functionality, everything that's import logic should live in the product. And, in my mind, Congregate in the end would be potentially an orchestration tool that you use to quickly script something that the product cannot do, not because it's an import logic, but it's maybe something specific to the customer setup, to the customer's network. So I wonder how much of that is potentially there. Those were all my assumptions that those would be the things, but I wonder how much of that is really there, and whether it's possible for us, given enough time, to get everything that Congregate does into the product.
Yes, so the example of scalability, and it actually covers the flexibility requirement as well. So for a large international bank customer that we have right now, we need to migrate over 50,000 repositories. I think you all know the customer I'm talking about, but we're recording, so we, rather than, well, if we use the API or the UI as it stands today, we would need to migrate, organization by organization or endpoint by endpoint, the repositories from GitHub into GitLab. The customer wants to provide a list of those repositories, as disparate repositories can be combined and organized into what they call a software component. So they're asking us to migrate software components per wave. So we need to be able to specify specifically which ones are going to be migrated in a wave of what could be 1,000 or 2,000 repositories at a time. So we need some way of ingesting that information and indicating which API endpoints we're going to be, which GitHub repositories we're going to be migrating to where in GitLab, right? We actually aren't mirroring the organizational hierarchy in GitHub and GitLab. We're actually creating a new parent path to migrate those repositories to, and that's another input. So you could see the scalability of being able to call the import API with very specific instructions on where to migrate to is a big concern of ours. And right now with the import API, I don't see how that would be really possible. Maybe we can talk about enhancements to it, but I don't know, Michael, any other example you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good example of, we care about the scaling of how do you orchestrate a series of imports in a large chunk, right? So like what we've seen from our testing is like the GitHub importer in terms of being a streaming importer, you know, we can fire it off at will basically, and that part shows it can handle a large influx of requests. The issue is then the kind of the metadata around it to make sure that that's organized there. I think another point about it with kind of doing things at scale is not only did we build out for this customer, you know, integrating the GitHub importer, we also built out some Jenkins migration functionality, Team City migration functionality. And so I think that's where there's going to be that delay of getting that in the product first is going to be the challenge versus integrating it for us and then funneling kind of lessons learned into what should go or what could go into the product afterwards. So I think that's something that, like, we just don't even have that in the product at the moment. So we can do that like at scale. We can move a bunch of their Jenkins configurations and Team City builds and all that. We can pull a lot of that data in and start getting them ready to move into GitLab, but that's not even, I think Jenkins is on the roadmap, but I don't even think Team City is even considered right now. So that'd be another example in terms of scale.
Yeah. Scale and flexibility, right? Like if we did it separate, just like let's do the SCM migration first, we would be losing an opportunity for that user experience because all of the teams who just had their source code migrated would then reintegrate with Jenkins and Team City. And the customer is trying to do like a flash cut to decommission those, you know, Jenkins and Team City and GitHub. So what the last thing they want to do is have their end users go back and reintegrate their source code with the old CI platforms. They want it to be, you know, we're migrating, let's start using GitLab CI. We're paying for Ultimate. We have 12,000 licenses of Ultimate. We're not going to even entertain the idea of going back to these CI platforms. So, you know, that flexibility is, when it comes to these types of strategic customers, is invaluable to maintaining a positive customer satisfaction. And it goes a long way. So.
Okay, so I hear there are two buckets of potential features that you see as something that it might be critical for you to own. One is these custom ideas, for example, reorganizing their code structure, their project structure during the import. So they're not just mirroring what they had in GitHub, they are organizing their projects differently, and they just give you a flat list of this is what our projects should look like now, and then you can ingest that in the script and kind of import into the new organizational tree in a way. And the other one that I just keep hearing, that is the flexibility to quickly react to something and not wait for the product to be updated with the feature. So the timelines are of concern as well to you, right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a factor. I think the way we've approached it, especially over the last few months with some of the newer migrations we've been supporting, Bitbucket Server to GitLab, GitHub to GitLab, I think what we've noticed is we come to like a crossroads, or we come to like a point where we say, can we build this out in Congregate, or do we have to have the product change? And we've gone both routes depending on the sheer scale of that effort, right? So like we could have put in time to recreate our Bitbucket importer in Congregate, but that's inefficient because that's doing double duty, right? Much more beneficial to build that out just to have the API or have that functionality consumable through an API endpoint so everyone can still use it and we can just consume the same import logic. Versus a recent issue we found with the Bitbucket server import is descriptions don't get persisted from a repo. It takes the Bitbucket project, which is a group in our case, it moves that description to the project description. So weird little bug, but it's also a one-liner API change. We call another API, we overwrite the description, we call it a day, right? So that's a thing where that second issue, that's a one-line fix, is something we'd eventually funnel back into the product because that's just a straight up bug. That larger functionality, though, is something that we do want to have in the product because we don't want to make it, we don't want to do double, like we don't have to do duplicate work all the time. If it is something that's a minor fix, then it's a minor fix, but we know that the work in the product's likely going to be a little bit more challenging. So there's the methods to get us over the hump, and then there's the methods to make this more like kind of more reliable over time.
Cool. Let me summarize my understanding thus far. So, you know, we consider that Congregate could continue to live on into the indefinite future, but where I see the dividing line and what I'm hearing is Congregate we should minimize the amount of functionality that PS is writing. That we need to skew towards calling endpoints and functionality in the GitLab application and coordinating it versus building capabilities that just simply don't exist in GitLab. Like one example that comes to mind, for instance, Michael, is I think you wrote some Python scripts to use GitTFS, for instance. GitTFS is something that like GitLab, the application, cannot accommodate. So unless you wrote that, like that would be a total non-starter. Congregate itself, like there are a number of different commands, CLI commands that call existing endpoints to the GitLab application, and those might continue to exist and be used because if we have a large customer coming to us wanting to migrate into GitLab, there is a unlimited number of permutations of like the state of where they're coming from and what objects that they have and what they want to pull over, and a human being needs to make the decision on like what exactly kind of like is an appropriate migration strategy if we want to have like a white glove experience for the customer. I assume that like we can if it's not that, if it's not a PS engagement, we can offer them documentation and like our existing import endpoints and say, here you go, and allow them to figure it out themselves. But in the cases where we want to white glove a large customer onto the platform, onto our application, there's going to be a need to have some type of tooling so that a human can coordinate and make the experience a good one. But what shouldn't be done is we need to funnel as much functionality as we possibly can. Like the group importer is a great example of this. Before that existed, like it was a hard stop, could not import epics. It was not something that PS could kind of overcome. But then we created functionality to allow that to happen, and then that unblocked kind of like some of these other engagements. So that's kind of what I'm hearing, which is import needs to be the ones that are leading on functionality, and Congregate and similar tools will hopefully be more of a, I guess we've been using the term orchestration tool over time, and less about building specific things that couldn't be done already with an existing endpoint or UI.
Yeah, so a couple of things with that. So the GitTFS one's kind of a funny one. So I have not played with GitTFS enough to really know how that fully works, but we have discussed that realm of how do we support a migration for like TFS, SVN, Perforce, whatever. We have some ideas that actually more revolve around the product and us consuming something that product makes. I think that'd be a much better, closer to a white glove experience that we can get. That's a discussion for another time, and probably with the Gately team as well. We have some ideas there. The second thing, the group import, I think is a perfect example of, we had functionality in Congregate that mostly covered what we needed, but then once we hit the roadblock and we couldn't get epics in, that then kind of helped to kickstart, we really need this functionality in the product, which is good. And it also provided the extra benefit of that slimmed down the Congregate code base. that's probably some of the most disgusting code I've ever written, was how we traversed groups to rebuild that structure. So pulling that out was cathartic. So I think that's good. I think that having that orchestration level as we get more features into the product, that helps to just make Congregate more efficient as a code base, because there's less code that we're overwriting, or there's less functionality that we're implementing ourselves. So I do think there's a balancing act. I do think Congregate will stay around for the foreseeable future. And I think this is going to help us kind of create a feedback loop of, we do this customer engagement, we figure out there's some gaps, we create feature requests, or even time permitting, if we know where the fix is, we'd create an MR to address it, or update documentation or whatever, like we've done in the past. We just make it more formal. I think that'd be beneficial, especially seeing recently with the LFS issue. I know there was a back and forth for a few weeks, and Casio and I jumped on a call, and within 3 or 4 days, he had a MR already in review. So I think that's immensely beneficial for us to have that constant conversation, where when we find those issues, we can bring it up, have that discussion, and try and get that stuff sorted.
What types of concerns do y'all have from a capacity and planning standpoint? Because I know, we tend to come with torches and pitchforks and say we need this thing right now, and that's because we didn't know that there was a deficiency or a gap or whatever until it becomes a problem for a customer. The only case I think that we were able to forecast the need for a thing was the one about the GitHub API, and we thought we might need it, and then we didn't think we needed it, and then we actually did need it. So that's this most recent one I think that we have an MR going back and forth on. But so how can we, if we were to go down that path of maintaining Congregate and then having our features kind of be ported into the import API where it makes sense, how would we best work in that way?
Yeah, I do have concerns with the ability of the import team to quickly react to emergency requests or emergency features from every direction. So BS, sales, just support. There's different channels that we get requests on, and given the size of our team, we're not able to serve all of them in the time that they desire, and at the same time also progress on another direction as well. So I definitely feel like there's got to be, you would need to maintain the ability to do things that you need to do in order to take care of the customers if import is not able to do it on the schedule that works for your customer. So that is, I think we need to, you need to be able to do that, right? So that would sort of alleviate the concern of the constraint that we have, because if anything, you're able to actually go ahead and serve your customer, and then we'll circle back and figure out how fast or how we're going to get that functionality back into the import code.
Yeah, that's the thing that worries me as well, Brian, which is I think it makes sense. And I think that, but the only challenge is we're always going to be in reactive mode if this is kind of how we operate. I mean, and the fundamental constraint is that, as far as I know, professional services is basically all Python developers. So there's no, even if we had a contribution model into the import API and a way for the import group to be able to maintain that, it's going to be a challenge to contribute any of that functionality directly into the import API, which would be the ideal situation, I think, which was, we enable contributions directly for the import group to be able to, nurture and maintain and then foster. But that's not the situation that we're in. So I think it's all in the import group right now, which I think is going to be a little challenging.
I would say as a Python developer and not a Ruby developer, and someone who's gotten multiple contributions to GitLab and specifically the import API under my belt, I think that yes, the learning curve is tough, but if there is some form of a precedent for that, I know there's some other logistics around it. I have faith in the rest of the PS engineers that work on Congregate to figure out how they can assist with that. So I wouldn't think that'd be the best. That is a barrier for sure, but I don't think that's the biggest barrier. One thing I am wondering, is, would it be beneficial to try to avoid the being as reactionary as possible? Is, would it be beneficial if like someone from PS sat in like the import planning meetings or something, just so like not even for us to like throw in ideas, more just so we're aware of like what that capacity looks like. If we're seeing, you know, something coming up like, okay, this is going to become a big problem, we already know that they're at capacity or something. What's something that, you know, for us just to have more visibility into the import team, how we can help out with that, or even like even not necessarily directly influence it, but if we see there's certain features that are coming up, if we can help to support, yes, this is important for this release based on these 5 customers we've been interacting with. You know, it's not just some one-off person or this is important, but like there's other, you know, how can we assist with that to make sure that it's not as reactionary as it currently is?
Well, I'd say that if you sat in those, you'd be maybe surprised or disappointed in like how much bandwidth do we really have for things like this. You know, so the team is pretty much booked all the time with the things we're working on, and anything that arrives, you know, kind of unexpected, needs to display something else that we've kind of planned to do, because we do have plans for, you know, what we're going to do over the next month or so, right? So there's always going to be a kind of prioritization decision when anything arrives. There isn't really a bandwidth that just kind of sits there awaiting for some features that were unexpected to be handled. So I'm not sure if that was clear or not, but there's really no bandwidth for these reactions in our milestones that are just kind of open there for filling. They get filled with the work that needs to get done. And that is a combination of, you know, some directional items we're working on, bugs, also features, and if there is something that's critical, if there's a, you know, a critical bug we discover or a critical feature we discover, which shouldn't be a thing, but is a thing, you know, then we need to kind of decide where that goes into the, you know, into the queue and how fast we're going to get it done. That said, it's probably never going to be fast enough for whoever's asking for it.
Well, the team operates on Kanban right now, right? So like the team just wouldn't pick up whatever next ticket it is, or they have to wrap up whatever's WIP and then jump on. What the cost of that is, it totally depends on what's going on at the time. So
I'm not expecting us to come in, you know, I don't want to be kicking down a door or anything. It's more the curiosity of just so we have more visibility into like what it's going to look like. I know we can dig through issues, we could see what that looks like, but just to kind of get a better feel for what the import team is doing, just so that we understand where you all are at. Like, yes, I don't want everything to be an escalation. I'd like it so that like we find an issue, we can get it resolved fast, or we can have someone from the import team help kind of guide us into a solution. I'm more curious to see kind of how the capacity planning is going, just to see, like, I know the import team is slammed. I feel like I've seen the direction for the import team change quite a bit over the last few months. I know it's just because it's a large scale reaction to different things. But just so that we have more visibility in it. So if we do see, okay, this is going to be a problem in 6 months for us, how do we make sure that like we start that conversation 6 months ahead with you all to make sure that like we get that sorted? Because let's say like there's something that, like you mentioned, critical bugs, right? A critical bug comes up. That's going to be pretty helpful for us as well. If we know like, oh, on .com, there's this bug that causes this thing. And then we know, okay, we have to stop migration engagements for a week or something just to pad ourselves to make sure we don't run into this issue. Something like that, I think, could even be beneficial for us as well.
So we are currently in the process of moving away from the like monthly one-time planning that we used to do for the milestones, and more into what Jeremy mentioned, which is a Kanban approach, where, you know, we really try to maintain a prioritized list of all things that's next. So what I'll do is I'll share our planning session for the previous milestone, where we kind of we were in hybrid mode between something that was planned for a month to kind of switching over to the Kanban planning, so you can get kind of introduced into the way we think about prioritizing and where things are. So I'll share with you all of that, and you're welcome to join either the the weekly sync meetings where we walk the board and talk about things, and/or this monthly planning meeting, which is not necessarily the old style. This is all we're going to do for a month, but it's more of a kind of a sync up on how we're doing with Kanban. Are things getting refined in time? Are things getting scheduled and delivered in time? So definitely, I'd love for you to see it and chime in or listen in, or at least kind of know what's happening. But it's probably going to be good if so at one point we talked about having a monthly sync between import and PS, specifically Congregate, to sort of talk about things. So if you don't find what I share informative enough, or if you don't see how, for example, you can insert things into the queue, or how it's going to work between the two, I'm definitely still open to having a kind of a just Congregate import sync where we specifically talk about these things, and it's not just the overall process you're trying to fit into.
Would it be helpful? Oh, sorry.
Please, Brian, after you.
I was just going to suggest, would it be helpful for us to do something similar where we can say like, oh, this month, we're starting migration projects with this customer who's on Bitbucket server, and we're doing this thing with Jenkins migration, and, like kind of give you the lay of the land, so that maybe something that you've been thinking about for a while as it relates to some of those source systems that you can give us a heads up on.
Yeah, it would definitely be helpful to me to know what you're looking at, so I can plan and not be just reacting 3 days late. So something shows up, and by the time we realize how big of a deal it is, and we get some estimate, we're like a couple of days into it, and if we had actually a couple of days heads up ahead of something happening, that would be great. So maybe we should think about having a sync meeting between the two groups, where we just kind of present what each group is working on, and then get each other's input and synchronize some of that if where it makes sense.
I'm going to say that absolutely needs to happen. PS is our most important internal customer here. I definitely encourage y'all to meet up frequently. The other thing, I think that this was a really helpful meeting. I know we're a little bit over time, so I wanted to ask you, Harris, do you think that you have the kind of the clarity and the information that you need? For me, this was super helpful, but how do you feel?
I feel great. I think this is a lot of what I already thought where we were. So there's really nothing new that I feel we've discovered or come across. I think we'll still probably need to just circle back and coordinate on what the change will look like, given that I don't think we've arrived at any new conclusions.
Okay, cool. Well, that's it. I really appreciate y'all. Thank you so much for the meeting.
Thanks
Have a great rest of your day.
this.
Yeah. See y'all.
Cheers.
Bye.